Good day and welcome to this webinar. We're focusing on commuter rail transport in South Africa. It seems to be in disarray with infrastructure being vandalized throughout the country and many lines, probably more than 90% of the railway lines out of commission, meaning that the train commuters do not have transport as we speak. So to address this issue, I invited Nosipho Damasane, who is the Prasa Rail CEO, to discuss the challenges that she's faced with and how she's going about fixing them together with her colleagues at Prasa, as well as Lubabalo Tinzi, who is with the SATAWU, the Transport Union of South Africa. He's a Prasa coordinator, to share ideas as well as highlight the problems that are being faced by Prasa at the moment. Now, right away, welcome to you, Nosipho, and welcome, Lubabalo. Pleasure to have you.
Welcome, both. Tim. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thanks for having us. And good morning, Lubabalo.
And also welcome to the attendees. We've got a lot of people who are interested, who will be posing questions to you in a moment. What is the length of the railway tracks in South Africa, and how many major lines are you servicing?
It's a 2,228. It's 2,228 kilometers across the country, with 530 stations, and we're servicing 34 corridors. You can call them corridors or lines, but we define them to be corridors, and I think that's basically it here.
Right, and this would have been the situation before the lockdown, I assume, right? This is what would have been the case before the lockdown in March. And post that, what is the situation now? Sorry, I can't hear you. I think we've lost your sound. I can't hear you. I'm not sure what's happened on your side. Can we get your audio back? All right, I'm talking to Lubabalo Tinzi as well as Nosipho Damasane, who is the CEO of Prasa Rail. We're trying to get to the bottom of the challenges that are faced by Prasa in providing train services in the country. And she tells us that we have more than 2,200 kilometers of railway tracks, 530 stations throughout the country, as well as about 40 or so of the corridors, as she calls them. But I wanted to find out what the situation is right now, because we've seen images throughout the country of train stations being vandalized and the tracks basically being destroyed. So I wonder how quickly we're going to get the services back in action. And in the meantime, I would like to hear your questions, because we know that the impact of this is that millions upon millions of commuters are without services at this time, and the cost of public transport is a major ticket item for people who live in townships and travel from faraway places to go to their places of work. And in many instances, the cost of travel to work has more than doubled, and this happens in a very difficult economic environment. But Lubabalo, you would be familiar with some of the issues. Then let me hear from you. What is the situation regarding the provision of train services?
The situation is very catastrophic, if I can say the least, because we have seen vandalism taking an ascending order as from November 2019, and this is from a background where the former board of control of Prasa have taken a decision to remove all private security companies that were rendering services within Prasa. You will be aware of the fact that this had been informed by the report from the public protector that their sole services were solicited in a corrupt manner. SATAWU had been concerned about the fact that these steps were taken without any logistical arrangements as well as proper plans of ensuring that vandalism and theft, as well as safety and security of Prasa employees who happen to be our members is taken care of.
If I understand you correctly, then you are suggesting that it is allegations of corruption first that led to what we see now, the destruction of the infrastructure. That it is as a result of the allegations and discussions at board level that led to the withdrawal of security, which then created an environment where this infrastructure has been vandalized. Is that correct?
That is correct. But if then we take that angle of view, it will also be important to note that there were other internal dynamics that were at play, which among them included the fact that protection services within Prasa was having no permanent person who holds that position. Everybody who had been assigned with the responsibility of ensuring that protection services is running smoothly, effective, and efficiently would be doing so on acting capacity, which led to the fact that they would be unable to take concrete and informed decisions, knowing very well that this is a temporal measure on their part. And this is one of the issues that have been raised sharply by SATAWU. But unfortunately, it took almost 36 months for Prasa to be able to listen to these views, which then had resulted in us finding into this situation.
Let me bring in Nosipho. I hope you can hear us and that we will be able to hear you. You are back with us. Yeah. Just to update that number, you said the railway lines told it's actually 20,953
No, it's
kilometers.
2,000. I've got an echo.
2,000. That is railway lines dedicated to commuter rail. That's what you mean, I suppose. Okay. Yeah. So now that was the situation before lockdown. What is the situation now? Because, you know, I've seen pictures everywhere that show the destruction of these railway tracks. It looks like you're left with no rail tracks now. And I don't know of the stations, how many are still standing and are usable at this time, including the corridors that you referred to. Nosipho? Can you hear me? All right. Well, looks like we lost Nosipho there for a while. But tell me, in the meantime, Lubabalo, your engagements with Prasa, how have they progressed so far?
The engagements are not yielding positive results, although, of course, there had been an attempt on the part of Prasa Rail in particular to address some of the internal issues which are at operational and strategic level. For example, Prasa had informed us that they have an intention of recruiting platform marshals as well as armed guards and CCTV cameras that would try to eliminate or reduce the extent of vandalism and theft, a view that have been welcomed by SATAWU with both hands. Of course, we were not in full agreement with the approach that have been taken, but at least we appreciated the fact that Prasa is beginning to align itself with the views that we have as SATAWU. We had some expectations on how this could be driven going forward. For example, SATAWU was expecting that there would be a presentation that gives a national perspective on how Prasa intends to curb vandalism, theft, as well as ensuring that the safety and security of employees who are our members is a priority. Prasa had decided not to involve labor in that process, but engage the shareholder and they have taken a decision then to form alliances with other stakeholders. So in as much as that is a problem from our side, but we believe very strongly that it is a step towards a right direction.
Thank you. Let me check again. Nosipho, you can hear us?
Tim, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And you've been following the conversation so far. Just to pick up from my last question.
Yes. I now have it. Feedback. I don't know how to deal with it. Hear me, Tim, without feedback?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, yeah?
Okay.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm still saying that I've managed to follow up the interview with SATAWU in terms of where they are and what some of the causes have been that led us to where we are.
Yeah, but what is the situation? How many stations have been?
We have of the 34 corridors that we have countrywide, we have actually managed to open up to 11 from the 1st of July this year, which is in 3 months' time. We have opened 11. We are looking at opening 23 corridors. We go with this in phases. So I would like to just take a step back and say what is the model that we want to follow to actually revitalize, because I'm coming in exactly at a stage where we are turning around Prasa on the 1st of July when we were getting into regulations that allow us to start operating. So I think Lubabalo has painted the picture in terms of somebody who was there in what happened in the past, but I would like to focus on what we are doing for the turnaround of Prasa. It's not as in disarray as it looks in some of the areas, and I want to unpack what that means. And I will just start talking operationally. Operationally, what we have done since the 1st of July, we have opened 11 corridors across the country. We have opened the 2 corridors that exist in the Eastern Cape. We have opened the 3 corridors in Gauteng and the rest of them in KwaZulu-Natal. We have opened more corridors on phase 2, again in Johannesburg as in Gauteng, as well as the KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape. We are looking now, and those are fully implemented, Tim. We've met all the deadlines that we gave ourselves. The one slight difference was that because we are so heavily vandalized in Johannesburg, we opted to go with a diesel service because we had to choose between not operating in Johannesburg at all because the overhead lines have been stolen, or find an alternative solution. And the solution we found is not different from anywhere else globally. Where the electric lines are not working or copper has been stolen, diesel lines are still the name of the game. So in Gauteng, and though they are slightly expensive than power, this is a phase 1 approach to actually just get our commuters to work. It's totally amazing because I actually go into the trains on Monday mornings and you actually meet commuters who say, we actually want the diesel service because it's more reliable, we don't have power issues that are going to fail, we don't have ESCOM issues, and we want to be on diesel, but we can't keep them on diesel. So in that phase 1, we are now converting some of those corridors back to power, and we are looking into implementing the new blue trains. We are looking into phase 3.
Sorry, let me interrupt you there. I want to talk about the train stations because at least here in Gauteng, it looks like all stations have been vandalized. Do you still have any stations that are in good working order that can provide shelter that is useful to the commuters? And of course, it speaks to the safety of the commuters as well.
Yeah, for all the corridors that we are operating, we actually have stations, not all of them actually working. Again, I will explain how we are making sure that our commuters are safe. The first thing that we do, once we identify a corridor that we want to open, we deploy security there. First of all, to make sure that we get the correct rehabilitation of those stations, as well as the railway infrastructure. And then the next step is to actually get commuters online once the technical teams have actually taken occupation and dealt with those stations. So in a corridor, we actually don't have all the stations operating in Gauteng in particular. We only have 3 stations not working in the Eastern Cape, 18 in KwaZulu-Natal in the corridors we're in, as well as 18 in the Western Cape. What we have identified with those corridors that have stations that do not work, we actually use them as drop-off stations. So we still put security and we still drop people to work to make sure that they actually do. And the team, that is the division of Prasa, that's actually working on stations is busy rehabilitating those stations so that as a next phase, we make sure that all the stations are actually working. We're also coming up with some technologies around what we are going to do with box stations, where we can actually have people buying their tickets and actually managing to get the right security for them to roll out. The reason why we are still vandalized is that we do not have sufficient security at the moment to cover the entire system. So we're covering mostly the system that we are operating with our passengers, and we're covering mostly the areas where we are now rehabilitating the stations. And therefore the vandalism is continuing, and I can't say to you it's not going to continue until we completely roll out the plan. So if you remember,
what do you think has led to this? Because frankly, in the history, if you will, of railway service in South Africa, we have never seen this happen. So it's almost like it's a coordinated effort to make sure that the railway infrastructure and system is destroyed completely, at least from the point of view of the public, and that those who are in charge are sitting idly by and allowing this destruction to take place. That is the view or the perception that we have as South Africans, that those who are tasked with looking after the infrastructure and operating the system are actually not doing their jobs.
I think against all odds, we're pushing forward, Tim. If I'm calculating that, and I'm indicating to you that by the 1st of November, we'll have 23 of these 32 corridors working, you can see that we're pushing ahead. It has helped us that the minister has actually done the integrated security with all the other like SAPS, TFR, RSR, DOT, the National Prosecuting Authority to actually assist us even in the regions. It's also helped us that we have insourced and we are continuing to insource security to actually then work with us internally. It is actually, so there's a lot of stakeholder engagement processes that are taking place, and I want to dispute what Lubabalo is saying, that SATAWU is not involved in this, because I remember very well that the SG of SATAWU was sitting at the launch of the integrated solutions by the minister in Rhodesfield in the month of September. So effectively, we are doing something about it. It's a national disaster, but what we have done internally is to make sure that we are hell-bent on getting our passengers on the train on time every day to work. And where we are operating, statistics will tell you security incidents are actually less. So we have more security incidents where we are vulnerable because we don't have enough security. We are going on tender tomorrow on Friday to get more security to actually come in to actually assist us in this process. And,
well,
Tim, that I wanted to, oh, sorry, go first.
Yeah, why don't you ask you the question? And this is what Lubabalo Tinzi said, that when you say you're going out on tender, you know, everybody will then be concerned and say, this is exactly the problem that Prasa has had, is the problem of tenders. The security contracts that were there in place were found to be corrupt, and that's why they were cancelled, and that's why we now have this problem of infrastructure being damaged and trains not running. So when you say tender,
it's actually an advert. No, it's an advert. It's an advert, not a tender. Sorry, Tim. We are insourcing security. We are employing our own security. So we're going out. Apologies for the word tender. We're actually going out for a recruitment drive, the second wave of it. So the advert for the recruitment of more security personnel who belong to Prasa is coming out tomorrow. So remember, we are going.
How much money are you? How much money? What is your budget to fix the damaged infrastructure and even extend the services that you should be providing now? Because at least, I mean, you're starting from a low base, right? You've got 34 corridors, you're operating 11, and you've got to upscale to 20 by 23 and ultimately 34. But even so, you have to extend your services. So how much have you budgeted for all of this?
It's a three-pronged approach, Tim. The one approach is the fact that it's costing us to rehabilitate all the theft to get into the corridors we're in, plus the fact that we're using diesel in Gauteng. That's a cost on its own. So I'm going to answer your question differently. There's also a reality that we had already budgeted as Prasa before COVID to go into a modernization process of stations as well as the pairways to accommodate the new blue trains. So effectively, what we are busy with now is to rework the stations that are completely vandalized, the pairway that is completely vandalized, those corridors. We were going to destroy them and rebuild in terms of getting the modernization process. Now we're targeting them to say, because they're so vandalized, we might as well take the modernization process to those corridors so that it's not an additional cost to Prasa, because we would have gone through that process anyway. It's just that we are going through that process in a painful way right now.
All right, Louis Kruger wants to know who is purchasing the cables and infrastructure materials from thieves. Do you know? Have you done any investigations? Do you have any report, a sense? Because it's one thing to appoint security people to look after the infrastructure, but it would be important to break the backs of the syndicates that are destroying your infrastructure. And it looks like it's an organized thing that's going on there.
We actually have a lot of arrests that have taken place over the last 2 months, including, amazingly, a person from our own employ. So when we say it's organized, we can't run away from that. But fact of the matter is that there's been a clampdown on the scrap houses and actually taking people to jail, and some of them without bail. So at this point in time, us having the integrated solution that has been given to us in support by the minister, as well as the 5 pillars that we're using in security now to make sure that we gather our intelligence properly, proactively, we combat this crime, and we are actually communicating across the stakeholders to make sure that this is done. And I think, Tim, you used the word we're in a low base. The reality of it is that we have to start somewhere to actually get Prasa back. It's 3 months that we have started to do this turnaround, and we think that we actually see, we're not talking about plans, we're executing plans, and we have passengers that are actually on the railway as we speak. In KZN, we're actually running a full day service at this point in time. So to answer him again directly, in the depots, we are now employing the security people that are ours and deploying them, and the plan is to deploy them across our depots to protect our infrastructure. We still have unfortunate instances like we were in Braamfontein last week, and we actually still had vandalism happening after we actually joined there. So there is a fight against what we are doing, but we are fighting the same way to get Prasa back on track.
All right, let me take this question from Zipo Zonke Butelezi, who says the people that are stealing railway tracks are a syndicate. They deliberately put all railway security personnel off duty during the lockdown, and that it was deliberate, that is, on the part of Prasa to do so. And Zipo Zonke says there are only 3 main buyers of copper and steel in Gauteng. So all illicit materials go back to the same foundries. Is it something that you know anything about this? Are you familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with the 3 people that are actually the 3 companies that are actually buying steel. I'm familiar with the fact that a lot of the steel companies that we have actually gone to visit, the scrap metal companies, have been found wanting because we've found our material and recovered it from them. So, but I don't quite know the syndicate at this point in time. We don't have that kind of intelligence yet.
And do you suspect that it could be deliberate on the part of some of the Prasa employees to facilitate the theft and the destruction of this infrastructure for some personal benefit or on behalf of other interests?
It would be interesting to actually analyze that, Tim. Suffice to say that we have actually have 1 person working for Prasa who is in jail right now is not a good sign.
Lubabalo, you want to add your comments to what we've been discussing so far?
I think we have made our point, Tim, in as far as the issue of vandalism and theft. The only area then that became of concern to SATAWU relates to the extent to which this affects our members who are employed by Prasa, because it suggests then that their lives are at risk. Number 2, they would be exposed to job losses if there are no quick actions and interventions that are taken. 3, it will be important for Prasa to adopt a collaborative approach in ensuring that there are fast ways of rescuing the situation. We are aware as SATAWU of the fact that there had been a proposal that was put by Prasa to ensure that the operations are up and running, and they are waiting for a response from the Treasury. It will be important then for Treasury to pay attention to this, because the commuters and Prasa employees cannot afford to live under the current circumstances, meaning this does not only have an impact to Prasa employees and commuters, it also affects badly the economy of the country.
Absolutely.
As you know, that rail is the backbone of the industry.
Exactly, and that's why I raised this issue, because it's the majority of people who use public transport who've been prejudiced by what's going on currently, and now transport costs have doubled or tripled in many instances. It's a heavy burden for most of the working people to carry as matters stand. Now, what is the cost difference between using diesel and electricity? This is another question from Louis.
It's actually, you know, Tim, what makes the diesel operation expensive at this point in time for us is the fact that we actually lease the diesel locomotives from Transnet. So that's basically what makes the cost. It's about 400,000 rands, which is actually what we didn't budget for. So the reality of it is that it's the cost of the lease. Other than that, then the rest of it is not necessarily that expensive if you look at the diesel that we use for the service that we're offering at this point in time. I also want to hinge on what Lubabalo is raising in terms of, I think the reason why we are fighting so hard to get Prasa back is realizing that Prasa is actually servicing the poor people of the poor. And they have to have the transport. But I am actually very happy to say that in 3 months, under the circumstances that you are painting, to have opened 11 corridors is not a joke. And Lubabalo knows that every Friday, except for this month, that we're actually not talking, we actually engage with SATAWU to discuss the issues in terms of what needs to be done, take into account what SATAWU as a union and UNTU as a union think we could actually work around as well. So everybody's views are important here. Last week, we actually went through all the regions, because we're now on level 1 where we can travel to actually go and identify further quick wins. And we've come back with quick wins in terms of corridors that we are going to open that are now part of phase 3.
Okay, well, Carmen Anderson says 11 out of 34 corridors is nothing to be proud of, and expensive fossil fuel options are ludicrous. How is the diesel sustainable, and how does it fit in with the government's responsibility to mitigate climate change?
It's not sustainable at all. As a result, we're converting the first corridor. We're looking in now in the month of October. We're converting, we wanted to start the service and get the people on rail, but we're now converting back to power. So we're working on the substation in Pretoria, Pinasport, to actually convert it back into a power line and put in the new trains. We are looking into doing that in the second corridor, which is Lelara, and then looking to do the same thing on the Naledi corridor. It's only 3 corridors across the country that are in diesel. All the other corridors that are remaining are actually on power. And please take into account the fact that in this month of October, we're talking 23 corridors, and we're only talking 2 additional diesel corridors that we will have, which is the Central Line and the Mapobane Line, where we want to put a hybrid service to service those areas. So our strategy is to get out of diesel back to power. Diesel was a crutch for us to start the process and get our people on the rail.
Well, Sipho Zonke is not convinced. He says the infrastructure damage was allowed so that the tenders can be issued to friends. And it says you can call it recruitment drive or whatever. We know that the intention here is to create opportunities for other people.
Maybe that's a reality for a Prasa that not the Prasa that we are trying to rebuild. I can just tell you that over the last 3 months, this is a different environment. I don't know the previous environment. I can't comment on it. All I know is that everybody who's at Prasa at the moment is all hands on deck, making sure that we get Prasa to work. And 11 corridors out of 34 is actually something to be proud of in an environment that has been so deep, so vandalized over a period of 3 months. It actually even make us prouder to say that we will be at 23 corridors by the end of October. So, I think we're moving mountains.
What is your budget to renew, to fix what needs to be fixed and to improve the services that you provide? How much is it?
Can I just say that on the 11 corridors that we're working, other than the cost of diesel and the electricity, we actually have spent our CIP, which is almost less than $1 million in a corridor to fix the stations. And the reality of it is that, like I said to you, once it gets to things like phase 3, we're now getting into the modernization process that was budgeted for anyway. So this would have happened differently if the pain of vandalism did not happen, but we still would have spent money on those corridors because we are putting new technology on the stations and new technology on the pairway to actually come up with a solution to use the trains that Gibela is building for us.
I'm asking that question because Mohammed Lokat wants to know which branch lines are going to be privatized, if any. But the view is that if they are taken out of Prasa's hands, the private sector would never let their infrastructure be destroyed or vandalized to this extent. That probably is being left to be destroyed simply because it's public infrastructure and therefore it's not being looked after.
That's usually the biggest debate on state-owned enterprises, Tim, is to say that if you put it in private hands, it's going to be better, but the same people actually come back and fix it. So at this point in time, on these 34 corridors, there is no plan to privatize any of them. What we're hell-bent to do is to prove that we can do this as South Africa and as a public organ of state. And we are going to do it.
And is there any money that's going to be taken from Prasa to be given to SAA? Do you know of such plans?
No, I only read about this on the paper, Sylvia. I only read about this on the paper, Sylvia, like you, but that discussion has not happened in the Prasa stable, or at least I'm not aware of it.
You mentioned something about modern technologies. What kind of technologies do you have in mind here? Jürgen Erhard wants to know what electronic monitoring systems you're going to use or you plan on using to safeguard process infrastructure, the stations and railways countrywide.
We're actually in the public domain saying that it's very, number one, because we have asked the question of whether we are being sabotaged or not. So we actually just don't want to get into the details in terms of what we are going to do. But I can tell you, we are building the walls. We are going ahead with that because that's the first big thing internationally to protect the lines, putting up HIMARS flags, putting drones, putting CCTVs, and a lot of whole e-guarding processes that we are putting in the system to make sure that we actually bring it, as well as service vehicles on all the lines that we can actually service, where security cannot actually be working online, including physical security. So it's a whole plan that we have communicated that looks at the entire solution for e-guarding as well as physical guarding, armed guarding, including the railway police and SAPS into the system.
Sylvia Jackson says checks are being built on the railway lines in the Western Cape, and with the recent High Court ruling regarding the national state of disaster and the protection of illegal land occupiers, that Prasa's hands must be tied. Have you had a situation where people have erected checks or whatever form of housing on your railway tracks?
Yes, Tim, we do in two particular lines, the Mapopane line in the Gauteng, as well as the central line in Cape Town. As early as Monday this week, actually, we were discussing already with the Housing Development Agency through the human settlements, and it's an initiative that the minister has actually started together with the provinces, both in Gauteng as well as the Western Cape, in terms of the land, because Prasa owns some land, Transnet owns some land. So land swaps and discussions like that are not things that we can do as Prasa, but in partnership with the human settlements, public works, we are actually working at looking at how to resolve those issues, obviously including stakeholder management. So yes, we do suffer that. That's why I was saying that in the central line in Mapopane, we will actually be putting an interim solution where we will actually have a hybrid solution of trains as well as buses in the areas where we can't navigate with the train at this point in time until the RSR gives us the solutions in terms of safety. So effectively, with that process has started, it's a second initiative that is driven by the minister that is supporting Prasa at this point in time. It's a security as well as the land evasions.
Alistair Moffat says a major beneficiary of the dysfunctional Prasa is the taxi industry, and that perhaps they are playing a role in the large-scale destruction or vandalizing of your property? Is there any relationship with the interests of the taxi industry and the destruction of your property?
It will be irresponsible of me to actually make an accusation of that nature, Tim. At this point in time, we actually haven't put a finger in terms of where the syndicates are sitting and where they belong. All we are looking is actually more collaboration, because we are already talking about how do we collaborate with them in terms of how we work for feeder services in the areas where we are going to have the hybrid solutions in Mabopane as well as the central line. So I wouldn't actually want to make an accusation of that nature. It would be very irresponsible of me.
But do you feel like you have your backs against the wall as Prasa, that you're trying to fix things and improve stuff, but you've been set back substantially? I mean, you had 34 corridors that were operating relatively well several years ago. Now you can only operate 11, and then you're moving in phases to go back to the capacity of 34 corridors. I don't know the number of trains that you are able to service, but you're not able to improve anything. That when you try to fix one side, then other corridors or other issues come up in the process, which make it difficult to upgrade and improve your services.
I think the corridor by corridor strategy that we are adopting is such that all the corridors that we have opened at this point in time, we actually have minimal security issues, which you would have in any corridor anywhere in the world. So effectively, whilst all the vandalism is happening, we're making sure that where we start the operation, there is no vandalism or there's minimal vandalism, because that's how we deploy security before we actually do the rehabilitation, before we sort the stations, and before we actually operate.
Because you see, I haven't even said anything about the signaling problems that existed in Gauteng, at least for some time, where trains were never kept time, most of the time, right? That they were unreliable. The efficiency of the past was gone. That sometimes, and we saw, for instance, in the lead up to last year's elections, that even President Cyril Ramaphosa was stuck on a train for several hours on the Mabopane line that you referred to, that was going into Pretoria. And then that was very much emblematic of the quality of services that Prasa provides, that you can get on a train, but you are not guaranteed to reach your destination on time. Those issues will have to be addressed and attended to in due time. How far are you from dealing with that, or it's not a question on the agenda at this time?
It's actually, Tim, if you don't start this process properly and take the opportunity of the stop, think, and start that the COVID has given us, you'll never get it right. I can tell you right now, our key focus is to be on time every day. And our target at this point in time is 80%. I'm reading you the stats as they are from week 27 right up to week 39 where we are. And we are hovering between 82% and 67% of on-time trains every day. Where we have actually had problems of locomotives, not theft, or locomotives and train sets, has been in KwaZulu-Natal, and we are addressing that. So that's where we actually saw a lot of the delays. Fact of the matter is, whatever trains we are running at this point in time, they are on time and they get to your destination on time in a very organized manner. I wish I can take you to one of the trains. You can pick a spot.
Take me to Kliptown Station. Let's see if we can move from Jeppe Station in Joburg.
I can take you only to the corridor. I'm saying pick a spot on the ones that are already operating. Or you can
sorry.
Yes, you can't just pick a spot. I've admitted already that those that are vandalized.
I'm based in Joburg, so I was going to pick up the spots that are very difficult for you to deliver, or and see how quickly you can sort out the problem. But tell me, what is your major challenges, Prasa? Is it just the infrastructure issues, or is it the people issues? What exactly is the problem? Because when we go back to matters relating to corruption, and Lubabalo, I would like to hear your comment. You made it earlier on. You said that there were issues at board level regarding corruption, which led to the cancellation of security contracts, which then played themselves out in security being removed, in the destruction of infrastructure. So what do you, as the new CEO of Prasa, what do you think Prasa's real problem is? Nosipho, and I would like Lubabalo's comment on this.
I think it's a combination of things, and there's a lot of change management that we have instituted since we've come in as a team into Prasa, because naturally, if this is happening, you'll find that people are demoralized. So there's an element of that, and I think the first 9 months of this year, when Prasa got under administration, there was a pickup in terms of direction and what needs to be done. And we've just taken on that, and we've started building on it in terms of then getting people motivated. And we've actually seen that. I mean, people in regions, I'm saying to you, we're coming from regions. The last week I'm going back, I'm leaving this Sunday back to KZN, and you can actually see that people are picking up the energy because they can see the direction. And we're not planning and planning. I mean, Prasa has got 5 failed turnaround strategies, and they're very good strategies. I read all of them. The problem is now we just have to continue executing. So effectively, I think the people problems we're dealing with, Lubabalo will tell you, we actually sit in meetings and have difficult discussions at 8 o'clock every morning, where we actually discuss some of these things in terms of what can we do differently to motivate the people, to deal with the fact that we actually do not have the cash flow to actually deal with some of the issues that are challenging us, as well as, so that's one issue. The second issue is obviously the vandalism and theft that we are actually dealing with as a war. I always look at the general who runs, who's the head of security, and I'm saying he's got broad shoulders, because we can't run this service until we have a concrete security plan. He has done that, and he's not just talked about it, he is implementing the security plans as we speak. So once we get the security plan sorted, this railway is actually going to get back on track. It's going to happen, Tim. It's happening already.
Lubabalo Tinzi, you are familiar with the goings on within Prasa. What would you identify as Prasa's main shortcomings? Because again, going back to the public and taxpayers and citizens in the country, people have watched from a distance and seen that train services implode, so to speak, right? And the infrastructure is the physical manifestation thereof. And the fact that trains are never run on time, and the fact that commuters do not feel safe on those trains, and on it goes. What do you know to be Prasa's biggest challenges that need to be addressed urgently?
SATAWU had made a diagnosis, informed, of course, by the documents that have been shared to SATAWU in the last 7 years. You should be aware of the fact that there had been changes that were taking place from time to time, board after board. And the fact that there had been no CEO who would run with the bait and take it to the required standard and level. And the documents are always saying one thing, but the major challenge is on the human resource. There is no person who is prepared to implement all the diagnoses that have been made in the last 7 years. Because if you look into those documents, some of the important issues that are coming out very clearly talk to capacity. And that capacity is disturbed by the fact that executives are on acting basis and they are afraid to take decisions. And there is also lack of political will on the part of the shareholder in ensuring that all these problems are resolved as speedily, as quickly as possible. And there is resistance internally, whereby if executives see that the changes that will be taking place will tamper with their interest, there would be a sabotage of some sort. And there are also systematic challenges that have been reported from time to time. And one of the important documents that have been produced by the last board before it was dismissed by the minister is able to identify, and it is being spot on about these challenges. And at the center of that, of course, would be the issue of corruption.
So corruption you'd regard as a major problem within Prasa?
Exactly. Corruption is one of the major problems within Prasa because people see that entity as their source of income beyond the fact that they are getting salaries that they didn't even sweat for them. And when they are expected to account, they are nowhere to be found. They want to blame junior employees, of which, from a systematic point of view, SATAWU had been coming out very clearly that we must develop a performance management system starting from executive level up to the cleaner on the ground, so that everyone then knows what is expected of him or her. But executives will continue to come up with lame excuses on the reasons why this cannot be done. And the fact that even if decisions are taken, they are not implemented.
Okay, well, I'll get Nosipho to comment on that, but Alec Mamakos wants to know why electricity is not being planned, or it appears there are no plans to divert electricity through the railway lines once the rails are replaced. If any rail is removed, then an alarm will be set off, and the new technologies are likely to depend on electricity in any event. Nosipho?
We are busy fixing the substations at this point in time, Tim. So definitely, power is the future. It's the way we go, and we actually have an interaction committee that sits with ESCOM on a monthly basis, where we discuss how we actually plan together to make sure that we continue to have electricity and power. And so those are taken care of.
Okay, now the other question, Fergus Derwin, and I think it's an important question that he's asking. Ultimately, when all is said and done, what is Prasa's overall overarching vision and strategy? Where do you want to be in 2-3 years? What kind of Prasa are we going to see down the line? Because for now, you know, it's a Prasa that's fixing problems left, right, center, and also operating fewer corridors than before. Fighting fires basically seems to be the case with Prasa at the moment. But ultimately, what kind of Prasa are you building at this time?
We are building a reliable, predictable Prasa from a railway perspective, with safe and clean stations and people who pay for their tickets with no fare evasion. We are bringing a lot of systems. We've got a new CIO as well. We're looking at a lot of systems to actually improve even the way we deal with ticketing in our stations. But that's basically where we're heading. It's a very simple vision, and it's a vision that applies to all railways. We want to be up there with the rest of the railway systems.
And when will we see a new efficient Prasa that South Africans can be proud of and commuters can say it provides the most reliable form of transport, to the extent that people should even start using trains than using their own vehicles? They must prefer to use Prasa. When will we get to that point, if ever?
That's our 3-year strategy in terms of the acceptance, and the reason why 3-year strategy is over and above the vandalism. There's also the modernization process that actually takes its own time, that we're working on at this point in time, to actually make sure that when we actually have all the blue trains running and select yellow trains in certain areas where we deliberately do that, because our contract with Gibela is giving us the capacity of the trains that we're looking for to actually go into the future. So effectively, I think it's our 3-year plan that we're working on, Tim.
And Lubabalo spoke about corruption being one of the, and then now, which gives you all the power, I suppose, and the ability to deal with the main problem, or one of the main problems of corruption within the organization. Are you dealing with that? Did you come across any such corruption? How widespread is it?
I think at this point in time, there's a lot of cases that are sitting with the SIU. I'm not at liberty to comment on them until we get the results, but there is action. People are being fired. It's already happened even before my time in this particular year, 2020. Like I told you, that some people are now in jail. So there's action taking place. But as Lubabalo was saying, this is cancer. It's gone so deep that when you're actually pulling it out, you're pulling yourself to say you'll do it overnight. But there is no tolerance, and there's definitely consequence management.
How many cases have you reported to the SIU, even though I may not go into details?
I can't go into
but just give us a
details, but quite substantial, yeah. I can't go into those details, unfortunately, on air, Tim.
So how many, maybe 10, 20, 100 cases, or you can't give us a sense?
No, I'm not going to give you a sense on that one, but you must know.
I'll tell you, I mean, I remember, okay, what happened to the toll trains? What is the situation regarding the toll trains? Are you recovering any money regarding that?
Yes, what actually happened was that, remember, they were going to be delivered in phases. So the first 11 came to the country, 6 of them have been actually auctioned. 5 of them we are planning to actually see if we can buy back, because we realize that you can shorten them. But our discussions, which are very confidential and crucial at this point in time, are such that what the next deliveries that will be coming will actually come at the right spec. So we won't have any of that coming again now. And those are for long distance traveling.
And those are the toll locomotives that we're talking about.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So,
you will be taking.
Yeah, we'll be taking a different. We're at the very crucial stages of our negotiations, but the reality of it is that I can put it out there that the next set of delivery to get to the 22 will actually be all the correct trains.
There has been talk in the political circles, and I think the president even suggested that there will be a time when South Africa has bullet trains, or at least trains, high-speed trains on the long distances. Will we ever get there, you think? Obviously, we wish we could get there, but I'm not sure with all that's going on that we will ever get there.
You know, there's always a silver lining in every dark cloud, because if you look at the technology of these trains that came that are tall, if you look at how advanced the technology is, you actually see that that is not far once we actually start getting the delivery of the right spec, which corrects whatever the past had actually created for us. The technology of those trains in terms of where we are competes exactly or even better than the Gautrain. And the blue trains that Gibela is building here in South Africa, in Roslyn, are actually sitting at the speed of 120 kilometers per hour. So things are actually happening. It's just unfortunately there's so much bad, and you know Shakespeare puts it very well. There's so much bad happening that people can't see anything good out of this. Because we're inside of this, we are trying to get the good out of it, and we're making the most of the situation as we turn around Prasa. This will probably be the best case study in this country when we turn around Prasa eventually.
Well, obviously, we're dealing with this matter from the perspective or the point of view that we want what is best and possible for the commuters overall, especially the working people who use trains on a daily basis. But a lot of people would rather use the train if it were possible than be stuck in their own cars. But people were driven to using private transport or taxis because of the inefficiency and the fact that the trains are very unreliable and not safe. I'm not sure, what to your mind you believe within a short period of time, 6 months to a year, are the key things that you are going to address that will give commuters a different experience from what they had before?
My feeling, Tim, is that over the last 3 months, we've been giving our passengers a different feel. We are reliable. We're working on time every day. We have appointed marshals that are actually in the stations, on the trains. We actually inspect the tickets inside of the trains. I myself are on those trains most Mondays, and I feel safe as an example. And we have taken management visibility seriously, that our managers are actually on the train as well. So the safety of the trains has actually improved. The other thing that we have done to deal with overcrowding is the fact that we actually do not open the entire train like we do in the Gautrain. We don't open the entire train for all the passengers on the way to avoid them the stampede on the trains. We actually have, in an 8-coach train, we will have the first 2 coaches opening only for people from Naledi, if one Soweto on the Naledi or Park Station route. And we will actually go to Dube and open up maybe the corridor, open up coach number 4. We will go to Langlaagte and open the corridor number 5. So effectively, we're bringing a semblance of order and security into how we board the train, how we behave inside of the train, and how we make sure our people exit the train. So we can't wait and say we're going to do it in 6 months. Every corridor we open, we structure it in such a way that it's a different environment altogether from what people experienced in the past.
Well, we hope you do not have governance problems down the line and fights with the board and so on, and that you will stay for some time. So let's work on a 3-year time frame, right? That we will then come back to you and say, Nosipho,
Yes.
tell us about your milestones, your achievements. What must we look out for in the 3 years?
Yes, that would be great, actually. That would be great.
Yeah,
Tim.
we wish you stay for 3 years so we can hold you accountable down the line. But what can we expect from you then in 3 years' time?
I think 3 years' time is what exactly we describe with the team that we're working on and the support that I'm getting from the CEOs that are actually running all the supporting services like the stations, which is Prasa Crest, what I'm getting from Prasa Tech, what I'm getting from the general and the rest of the support services teams that we have to actually get. Everybody is actually saying that we need to get more bums on seats and we have to get our people on the trains. I tell you, we will have a service that's reliable, that's safe, that's clean, that's actually on time every day. And that's where we're heading.
And as we conclude, I did ask you about budgets, but you haven't given me a number, and there's a reason for that. It's because we know with SAA that they're talking about 10.4 billion rands bailout, and we are very wary these days, very sensitive that sooner than we imagine, you'll also be asking maybe for 40 billion rands bailout or whatever. So what budget are you working on?
That's not on our plans, Tim. What we are doing at this point in time is we're working on a very clear weekly revenue recovery plan from our fare revenue as we are actually moving our passengers along the line. So at this point in time, we haven't actually even discussed our executive committee with our new accounting authority, but this time we have not actually talked about going back to government to look for bailout. We are looking for fixing the system.
And a quick one, Lubabalo Tinzi, from SATAWU's point of view, what would you like to see within the next 18 months? Very brief response from you.
SATAWU wants to see a modernized Prasa and a clear program of action that seeks to address that must be tabled through robust engagement. And one of the fundamental issues that must be at the center of it must include learning and development of the employees so that they would be compatible to the modernization program.
Thank you, Lubabalo Tinzi, for having been part of this conversation. And Nosipho Damasane, the new Prasa Rail CEO, thank you for having been with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah, sure. And we'll take you up on the offer to be on the JP to Cape Town. Very soon.
It's coming soon.
Please invite me.
Myself and Lubabalo want the same thing. We can like management want the same thing. So me and Lubabalo promise that we'll take you on a modernized train.
Sure. And thanks again to the attendees of this webinar. Thanks for your time and your questions. Until next time, have a great day. Goodbye.